session. And the first session is focused on what does energy transition mean for African countries. Our speaker is Chigozie Nweke-eze. He introduced himself already, but I will say a few things about him before he comes up. He has 30 minutes for the presentation, but depending on how long it takes, we would also have opportunity to ask him questions. And so if you have a question already, try to put it down, and we'll call for questions after his presentation. Right, so Chigozie is a doctoral researcher at the University of Bonn, and as he told us, he's working on the intersection of financing, governance, policies, geographies, and infrastructure for energy systems, specifically in Africa. And also, he's the director and the founder of Integrated Africa Power. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together as we welcome Chigozie for the first presentation of CAPiG 2.0.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this very nice introduction. I'm happy to be here. I was actually, when I saw that an event like this is going on, I was quite happy, you see, because we need things like this. You know, I think that it's good to start, and as time goes on, we can then expand and include many people across African countries. And yes, it's a pleasure to meet people. Networking is always good. You see, I've met so many people here already. I was moving around a lot. I think I met Taiwo in Hamburg when he was in IC. Yeah. So, you know, we started from IC, and you see how even Ibrahim, yeah, we met in Bonn, and so many others, yeah, and Judith as well. So it's good to network. And Nigerians, as you know, are always pushing boundaries wherever they are. Cameroonians as well. Yeah, and it's a try, you know, we're always pushing boundaries, isn't it true? It's true. And yeah, let's continue like that. This one. I wanted to, you know, just use the opportunity to make a presentation. Of course, I've introduced myself and my field, which is in the energy sector. And of course, the energy sector, I realize that it's quite broad, yeah, and everyone understands it. So I wanted to just make something, you know, just, you know, as fast as general as possible that everyone can follow through in and everyone can relate to. Because of course, if you look at the news, there's a lot of things about energy now. You see, if you say you have Russian war, you can easily relate it to energy again. You see, gas and everything. So it's in the 21st century, the age we live in, it's really difficult not to mention or not to know one or two things about energy. Whatever we also want to do, whatever we want to do in the future, would most likely also, you need to also understand one or two things. Yeah. I would also encourage, I think that we would like this to continue. I'm sure we'll have CAPiG 3.0, and I want to also contribute as much as I can to this in the future. So, yeah, I remember that Dr. Kolo, who also presented himself, is also with us. And, you know, things like this, we have to, there are people who are doing very well, and we have to, you know, also try to show the way to others, you know, coming up, and also learn from others who are coming up as well. By the way, you can learn from everyone, and you can imagine what you can really learn also from everyone. So I like the diversity of fields of people here, and yeah. Okay, now that the slides are ready, I was quickly talking while waiting so that we are not bored. Okay, really, as I just wanted to ask us a question: what just energy transition actually means for African countries. Of course, we know that there has been a lot of questions about energy transition. It's been a trend, and then that's why renewable energy is also quite pursued. There's a lot of entries you can make through it. I mean, for those of us who are scientists, you can connect to it. people who are working in the health sector, you can connect it. I mean, there was COVID-19, and then there were also people saying, okay, fine, let's use a lot of solar in hospitals, let's cool some of the vaccines. In fact, I have a friend based in Kenya. She's actually innovated a very nice vaccine box, powered by solar. Things like this, Okay, let's just go to the next slide. I've already introduced myself. I will rush through this. Of course, as I've said before, I have a background in economics, which I started studying in Nigeria. Then I studied economics again in Erlangen, and came to Bonn for my PhD in geography. Largely been in research and consulting in different capacities, public sector, private sector. And I was also at the University of Bonn for an extended period of time, of which from Bonn I came to Berlin for a while. As you know, I am also leading a scope in research in hydrogen as far as African countries are concerned. And most recently, I will also be spending time in Paris because I have to have the Rent 21 team there build the African department. And I also founded Integrated Africa Power. Next slide. So for sure, this is Integrated Africa Power. What we do here is simply just bringing in experiences over these years. So we actually focus on the energy sector and infrastructure development as far as the African continent is concerned. We do studies, research, of course, studies, different kinds. We've been doing this for a while now, for public sector, for private sector. Sometimes you have to research feasibility of a particular project. Sometimes you have to make research and advise government officials about a particular policy they could take for the African continent. Of course, we've done this in some fields. And then, of course, we're also interested in consulting and planning, and then most also, quite interestingly, investments, which there is a huge gap on it. And then projects, real projects. We know that African continent, we need energy, isn't it? Everyone knows it. I mean, everyone who grew up in Nigeria knew that there was also no power, right? And so you have to also be thinking, okay, what should we do? That's how I started to actually, my interest in the energy sector grew. And we're working on a number of projects. Some of them are in the pipeline, some of them are. So, that's where we are. If you want to, in any way connect with us, if you feel free to do so. And I also want to use this way to encourage us to, try to see how to apply the knowledge we have gotten here to actually use it practically to improve, situations around us in the African continent. So you can start small. You don't know where to get to. So let me begin by just giving us a fast overview. What is because I'm trying to ask the question, what does just energy transition mean for the African continent? We know the situation, and not just in Nigeria, but in many African countries, also in Cameroon, and so we of course need more energy. More energy is directly connected to socio-economic development, industrial growth, anything you can think about. So you need energy for those things. And of course we know that there is also a very tight budget that limits the national governments from doing this as much they should. Next slide. We are living in a country, in a continent where you have a lot of resources. So you have a lot of these resources are existing, and we want to convert these resources actually to generate electricity and provide energy access. But if you look at the diversity of the resources we have, you see that it includes, so you have fossil fuel, which is oil and gas and coal, and then you then have renewable energy resources, right? So you can have a debate about it in the context of energy transition. What do you do about it? Do you really then leave the fossil fuel energies, and under which conditions? If you really want to pursue renewable energy projects, under which conditions as well. But not just the energy resources, we also have the minerals that are also used to build these technologies. You see, so to think about cobalt, lithium, and the rest. Next slide. Yeah, a just energy transition would then mean a transition that kinds of, of course, this whole question about energy transition started with climate change, isn't it? And so people were saying, okay, fine, the internet, the planet is, burning. What do we do about it? So people say, okay, fine, we can use more renewable energies now. And so there has been so many trends on that. But I think that given the situation of energy poverty as well and the need for energy security in the African continent, it's good to balance both. So you balance both so that you make sure that when you are pursuing both of them, if you are driving an energy transition, renewable energy projects, you're also at the same time solving climate change. So if you're solving climate change and getting finance and building projects for it, you're also making sure that people have electricity and energy access. I think this is also very well reflected if you also know about the launching of the Energy Transition Plan, which was launched by the Vice President just last week. You will see that you can also see aspects of this. Next one. We needed more financing, so there has been flows of financing in different aspects and in different places. We need more of it. Some of them come from development financial institutions, because World Bank. You also have technical cooperating institutions like GIZ, as you know, KFW, so AFD, and so many other ones. So these institutions are working hard to provide some financing, but we need more. We need more. But we as African countries also need to know how to structure proposals to attract financing. Sometimes you see that the financings are there, but you see other continents making more strides in attracting this financing than African countries or African continent has. So it's also a question to also think about it. Climate finance and the rest. Next slide. We want to talk about sustainability. Of course, you cannot really talk about just energy transition without necessarily then thinking around sustainability. And of course, we know about sustainability. When you want to really then combine, economic, social, and environmental pursuits, you want to consider them in concert, right? So, of course, you've had a situation whereby, because for my doctorate, I traveled a lot to Kenya, and I was observing so many large-scale projects there. And of course, you have cases, you need these large-scale projects to generate electricity and everything, but at the same time, you have to then think about it critically. You see, what are the effects on the communities where the projects are built? What are the environmental impacts? You see, so these are also very, very important, so that you do not then only focus on the economic benefits of a particular project, but you also want to think of, okay, fine, what of others? So because I can give you examples of issues like this that have come up in different cases where people say, oh, wow, okay, this project is supposed to be green, but see the negative impact it's having on us. Is this really then what it should be? So these are the things to consider. If you are doing a project, you want to think again about it. There have also been issues of exploitation, right? And resource costs, I've talked about it. I'm actually using general terms, right? So I don't bore us. We have to create jobs, isn't it? And scale transfer. So these are the things that the governments can negotiate to say, okay, fine, if there's a project coming, this is what we want. So of course, we know about hydrogen and everything. We are also advising a lot of governments on hydrogen, and this is also some of the things we tell them. You come to the table, already kind of ready to negotiate, and you have the points that you want to put out to investors. Nigerian oil and gas spillage and everything that happened. So I think we don't want to have something similar in that, yeah, isn't it? Because what happened in Nigeria was, that kind of investment, and everyone was not so nonchalant. there was oil spillage everywhere, you see. And yeah, you want to plan around it to also avoid the whole issue of resource costs and the rest. Yes, next slide. So you cannot really divorce energy from geopolitics. We live in a political world, you see. So whatever is happening in politics would affect energy. And in fact, everything we do in life, you see. That's why many Nigerians are so interested in this presidential election that is happening, right? So, of course, you need to follow political trend because it affects one or the other, what is going on in whatever you're doing. And of course, it also affects what is happening in other parts of the world, affects trends for energy transition. So, you have, for instance, of course, you know that if you pursue renewable energy, you can ask also what really then happens to countries that are already producing oil and gas, right? So oil and gas. So are you telling me if there is, sudden decrease in the importation of oil and gas, what will happen to Nigeria, for instance, where you have 80% of the revenue coming from oil and gas, and so on and so forth. So you will see a change. By 2050, you will see a change. But then, how do you prepare for this change? It's a question we need to answer. Some people, some countries, you know that OPEC is now the leading energy leader. So by the time renewable energy comes to play, you may have a power reshuffle, right? So, and then we know about the whole Russian war that is going on, and the effect it has, in the countries that in the energy, in fact, in the global energy map in general, whether in energy, whether in food sector, and so on. And yes, I want to end here, and I want to also encourage us to feel free to make a contact and ask questions, and so that I'm always happy to connect. And yeah, please, if you even have questions now, please feel free to ask me before I drop them.
Okay, there's one. Okay, fantastic. All right, so
yeah, first I want to ask you about, because you just said in the last slide, you didn't say it, but you had it.
Okay. Yeah, drink them.
Yeah.
yeah.
You wanted to avoid this, but
No, I don't want to avoid it. Yeah, that's good, interesting. There are so many things we can actually talk about it. But of course, you see that it's a question of geopolitics. You have a situation, countries where these large-scale energy projects are, that feel that pressured or receiving pressure to develop large-scale renewable energy projects, are beginning to question, okay, these countries that are asking us to do so, what are they also doing in their own countries, you see? And is the development of renewable energies making these countries dependent on developed countries that are forcing them to do? So it's a question, it's a very, very interesting question which we can talk about there. But it's an attitude of then negotiation. How do you bring in the technologies or develop the technologies within the countries that want to also adopt these renewable energies? You see, how do you make them also? How do you build an industry around the technologies so that people benefit? They are also taking part in the right value chain in the production of these energy technologies, right? And not just serving as places for taking resources, you see, and then creating jobs, high quality jobs elsewhere. You see, this was also just like, for instance, getting oil and gas in crude form in Nigeria and processing elsewhere and bringing it back. So we also know, just to give you an example. So things similar to this, so that you avoid trends like this.
Yeah, so I want to just be specific. When you there was a hydrogen atlas done, right? So there was where is water in Nigeria?
Where is what?
Where is water available in Nigeria?
Water.
Yeah. Right? And then they say, there's a lot of water available, then we can do a hydrogen project. So who is allowing anybody to use the groundwater that is there for this technology? Yeah. So I mean, groundwater should be
used. Yeah, I get your point. Yeah. So yeah, of course you know that water is used to produce hydrogen. Fresh water.
Yeah.
And of course, fresh water is also used to do other things, right? So agriculture, drinking, household use, and you don't want it to conflict. So of course, it's left for the government to negotiate. This also builds on negotiation. So of course, if a country negotiates better, then this water can be taken from the sea and not from ground. And then you use that opportunity to introduce a technology called desalination plant. Desalination plants converts salt water to drinkable water, which can then be used for the hydrogen and then also used to serve, to increase water access. You see, so these are the awareness we're also building using our company to advise governments, African governments also included, to consider the right things they need to consider when these projects come to them. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. My colleague just mentioned some part of my question, actually on the medical. And we did diverse my question in the other way. You mentioned about the energy resources that we need. And for example, you mentioned that we have solar, wind, geothermal, hydropower, so just some details. So my question is, what do you think that Africa can use its personal resources to really use those different energy resources to cover the need of energy in the continent? Maybe it may be at the local level or countrywide or nationwide, kind of this, because it kind of, you can find a link between this wind colonialism that you just mentioned and migration. Sorry.
Yeah. We live in a geopolitical world, I've told you. So every country is always thinking of themselves first. And so African countries should also begin to think of themselves first. So when you sit on the table, negotiating, so people are coming from their own perspectives, right? You also have to come from your own perspective. The African continent needs more energy because of energy poverty. It has the resources, so it can negotiate, okay, fine. Whatever you are dealing, whichever deal you see before you, how do you think of yourself first? You see, how do I improve energy access in my country? So even if it's hydrogen deal you want to do, I'm not saying you shouldn't cooperate, you should cooperate. Because we need financing and we need technical, so you have to cooperate. But in that cooperation, you have to lay your case and say this is what, we would love this, but this is what we would want attached to this. So this is part of the things we're also doing in the hydrogen sector, for instance, you see. So hydrogen, of course, Germany needs 50%, would import 50% of its hydrogen need. And African continent can do that in a cheap form. But then which things can you include that will also benefit African countries in that process? I've just mentioned to you water and water dissemination. I've just mentioned to you energy access. So renewable energies will be used to produce this hydrogen. So how would you then also make sure that a certain percentage of this renewable energy, or it's all going directly to the grid to improve it? You see, so you have to know these things and then you bring them forth. In the case you are making, we have a lot of resources, we need to develop them, we need financing to do so, we need the private sector to do so, and you want to make the country conducive, and you want to incentivize.
Yeah. And do you think that Africa can say, okay, now I can decide to stand by myself? no needing help from corporations. So do you think that we have that kind of resource, kind of energy?
I mean, the world we're in globalization, and we are. You see, you cannot really disconnect yourself from what is happening globally, even if you want to. So you have to think of your country, but at the same time connect globally. I mean, that's how the world works now. If you say you want to divorce yourself completely, you see what's happening. So, I mean, use the war, for instance, as an example. So, you see, if Russia says, okay, fine, we want to, you see the effects. So, I mean, you just need to know how to make your points clear when you sit on the negotiation table and postulate. I think that it all boils down to that, and how it boils down to having good institutions within the country itself and the rest. Any other?
Thank you so much for your I would like to ask, by 2035, the EU has already proposed, a ban on fossil fuel cars, so which means that would be a great disadvantage for Nigeria, being an oil-producing country. So I don't know what your company or what you guys are doing more to advise the country or to create awareness on renewable energy. For example, my own project has to do with desalination of water and using the desalination of water from seawater, then the leftover concentrated water to generate electricity. So how do you intend to discourage, not really discourage, or to really inform Nigerians and Nigerian government about, fossil fuel becoming an history, because every country is, looking towards renewable energy and all. So
thank you so much for that question. I think that the Nigerian government knows what to do. Yeah, I've met some of them. They come to Berlin from time to time, and I meet with them. You see, so they know what to do. I've interacted, so of course, they know about this trend of energy transition. You see, and in fact, if you look at the Nigerian energy transition plan, it was well written. You see, incorporating all these things you just said. So it's then a question, but then you have to also think is about, as they also said, talked about balancing energy security with climate mitigation. You see, so you have to also think carefully. As you're doing the transition, is it costly for you, too costly for you that you're sacrificing too much for it? You see, because you have to balance it, because people have to live first while we are also transitioning. And this brings in the question of gas, for instance, as an example. Some people have said, okay, fine, no gas, not even gas, you see. And I remember also that in the last few years, the EU stand was also no gas in African countries, right? And suddenly, gas, EU countries began to also then say, okay, fine, we need gas for energy transition. So you see a political play there. But that's why I've told you that it's also interesting to think also what would work best for you as a country, depending on the resources you have, and then transition in a very practical manner, in a very feasible manner for you. You see, so the Nigerian energy transition plan recognizes gas as a medium for transition. So they, of course, wants to do gas before, while also continuing, and also while we wait for base load. If you know the electricity sector very well, you know about base load, right? So that's you have to have base loads, right? You want to avoid intermittencies. You cannot. How many can you power steel industry, for instance, using solar? Is it efficient now? Not yet. Okay, so you say, okay, fine, let me use what is feasible because of this and this. But at the same time, in Nigeria, there are a lot of cases where you can use a lot of renewable energies. So which is already going on. So you have a lot of solar. In rural areas, this is going on. Rural Electrification Agency, for instance. You have wind resources. You can use these things where feasible and where it is not too costly to be afforded. So it's not. You have had cases whereby there were also in other countries where you have a lot of renewable energy and it just make the cost costly to be afforded by the citizens. You see, so you have to balance this. There's a question of affordability, there's a question of energy access, there's a question of climate mitigation, there's geopolitical question, there's socioeconomic question, there's sustainability question. So there's a lot of things in this basket which we have to juggle to make your own stance.
Do you think it's ever affordable for Africa to convert everything into renewable energy, or for any country to grow?
Currently not. But perhaps in the future, you never know. I mean, things change. I mean, you saw what happened with the solar industry. It started high, and then at some point it went low and very affordable, right? That anybody can do home solar system and the rest. So anything can happen to different technologies over time. But currently, it is not feasible for any country in the world to exist completely on renewable energy. Unless rich countries can do that. Of course, rich countries can do that because they have the financing power to say, okay, fine, we can give subsidy. You see. But developing countries do have that tight budget, which is making it infeasible for any African country for now to say, okay, fine, we want to do completely renewable energy. Unless island countries, for instance, where you have less population, very little population, and huge resources. Because you're looking at cost, you're looking at also the economic dimension, right? You're looking at cost, you're looking at feasibility, base load, right? You're looking at technical issues. You're looking at a number of factors to make that decision.
Do you think as well that the technologies that are there now are the appropriate ones for the African continent?
That's a very interesting question.
Possibly you can have more time.
Yeah, we can ask more time later. Yeah. So that other people can also ask. But yeah, it's a very interesting question to think about, really. Because, that's why there's also this importance of having more research institutes within African countries, having the industries within African countries. That's the only way you can then really improve it or switch it in a way that really suits better the context you're working on, right? But if everything is imported, some of the solar panels that are imported because they were built really to suit the countries, and then you're just using it. So that's also that part of skill transfer, but we can go later. Okay.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, there's one more.
Yeah, it's a fun question. So actually, I have two questions. The first was, you already touched on it, which is about how Africa and Nigeria can, adapt to the high cost of renewable energy. But we already talked about it. The second one is a fun question, and also a naive question. So could you, I'm not sure if your research or activities relates to, the issues of power in Nigeria. So could you maybe explain to us in a layman terms, what is the problem? We have, for example, some people would say that the politicians they are making money from the importing of generators, and that's why they are sabotaging power in Nigeria. Some people are saying that it's about distribution, that we are generating, but all these are rumors, and I'm not an expert in this area, so maybe you could tell us a bit more in simple terms.
Yeah. It's not easy to say it in simple terms because it's the Nigerian energy sector. A lot of problem befalls it, right? But I think that for Nigeria, it's not so much of financing. Surprisingly, many people will say finance, but it's not. I think for Nigeria, it's more of a question. Okay, partly because of financing, because what has happened in Nigeria was also partly recession, right? So. And you see less sale of oil and gas, which means less revenue. And a lot of technical deficiencies in the distribution sector. Not sufficient political will. I think that's what you want to put first. So there is not enough political will to push things forth, but I don't want to say it as a blame because you see the reasons why. I mean, the economy is not performing so well, and therefore less revenue, and less money to put in. But I'll just give you just one example to end of this. So there's something called the Presidential Power Initiative. It's another name of it is called the Nigerian Cement Deal, which Chimamanda Adichie asked when she came to this country. So that deal was a very good deal, proposed by Siemens. It was well structured, and that deal is supposed to transform the whole, landscape, energy sector landscape in Nigeria, as it did in Egypt, because that same deal was also applicable in Egypt. But of course, that deal was structured in a way that the Nigerian government had a responsibility to provide a particular amount of money. See, and they did not provide that percentage in time. They just provided, I mean, this is a project that started in 2016, and just now, this year, is when they were able to provide the percentage they were supposed to provide. And so the whole plan is just starting. You see some of what I'm talking about. So it's a combination of a lot of things. Should we say, okay, we blame the Nigerian government for it? But if you're in Nigeria, you can then say, okay, fine, the issues of revenue and oil and gas may have prevented, and huge debts accumulated over years, may have prevented them from meeting their part of the deal, which delayed the whole thing. But of course, it is not going to be rocket science to transform Nigeria's energy sector. You just need a combination of political will, technical work, and this will get it done. Okay.
Thank you.
Next.